Hey, Dad. You always talked growing up about the importance of choosing your friends wisely, and you brought up that verse there where Paul says, "Good bad company corrupts good character." And I was thinking about that recently because, of course, a lot of us can't hang out with our friends right now because of COVID. But we've got all these friends on Facebook, and man, I've just there have been some people that they just irritate me to no end. The stuff they post, and I'm like, should I unfriend them? And then I think, would Jesus do that? What would Jesus do? Would Jesus unfriend someone that he doesn't like what they're commenting on? I,
Yeah.
so this
I
is
heard
just,
rumors that he unfriended Judas the night of the Last Supper, but I don't know if that's true or not.
I think Judas unfriended
That
himself.
near
But
would have, yeah.
anyways, I was thinking about that. What's your take on that? I mean, is it a Christian? Should Christians unfriend other people?
Well, you know what I found out now? There's this new deal. You don't have to unfriend them. You can just silence them. That way you don't hurt anybody's feelings. But you know, maybe that's a little deceptive. I'm not sure. By the way, Jesus didn't unfriend Judas. You're right. Judas left him. So really what you're talking about is, again, that bad company corrupts good character. In fact, it's interesting before it says that, it says, don't be deceived, which in other words, it's implying that, hey, this is an area where it's easy to be deceived, that if you're hanging around with bad people, it is going to corrupt you. I think it's in one of the prophets says, hey, if something that's unclean touches something that's clean, does the unclean thing become clean or the other way around? And yeah, it's obviously the other way around. But I always think too of a proverb, and I know you're familiar with this one a lot too, because we talk about it a lot. He who walks with the wise will grow wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm. So I guess what you're asking is how much do you hang out with other people that maybe have contrary opinions or different perspectives on things? And my kind of gut reaction would be, I don't unfriend people typically. The reason I don't is because I realize then I lose influence on them in their life at all. You just lose touch with them, and I may not have much influence anyway, but as long as they're not influencing me, and I determine that, not what they post. It's how I mull over it and read it over and stuff. But I may never be able to influence them, and they may come to a point in time when their life is at a tough point, and I just want to kind of be available there to them, and you're not if you've unfriended them.
It's interesting that I read a thing recently that said the algorithms, they figured out that one of the ways to keep you engaged is if you post a negative comment on somebody's, I don't know how they read this, but if you post negatively on something that irritates you, they're going to actually put that person's posts at the top of your feed over and over again because they saw it ignited something within you to respond to. And I've seen that. There was one person that one time I got suckered in, and I'm like, I shouldn't have responded, but I couldn't help myself. And I responded. And then from then on, that goober, everything he posts comes up at the top of my feed. And I'm like, I want to unfriend him.
Yeah.
But then there's that thing too, of like, well, there may be a moment. And I've seen on social media, I've seen that this is my take on it. The louder people are on social media, the more they're struggling. It's just this weird thing. I've seen people, they're like, oh, I love my husband. I love my husband. I love my husband. I love my wife. We're getting a divorce a week later. You're like, wait, what? You were just on a world cruise together. What happened? Yeah. They were trying to prove to themselves that. So social media is so deceptive. And I that's why I was kind of wondering. I'm like, so what about this? There is the idea that you become like the five, was it Jim Rohn said, you become like the five people you hang out with most.
Yeah.
So if you're hanging around with people that are focused on negative things, of course, in person, we know this happens to us. We get dragged down.
Yeah.
It's a little less likely you'll get dragged down on social media, but what's your take on that?
Well, it's funny what you said about the one who's the loudest is probably struggling the most. Because I remember when I was in business school, they talked about how one of the signs of a dying company was a very expensive ad campaign. It was their last breath of hope. Okay, if we can just advertise, maybe we can pull this thing out of the pit.
What's
so, I guess that works for people too in relationships.
The Wizard of Ads, he says, marketing is jet fuel. It either causes your thing to go further faster or it blows it up, right? Yeah. So
well, if you're already going down in flames, you may as well just add the fuel to it. So it'll be a big, beautiful explosion when it hits. I just think, I'll tell you what I think is, and I think it's totally different when we're talking in person versus online. But I'm reminded of something when we were thinking about this. I thought of in 1 Corinthians where Paul says this. He says, I wrote to you in my first letter, which obviously then we find out the First Corinthians is actually Second Corinthians because he wrote to him an earlier letter, but we don't have that one. He says, in my earlier letter, I told you not to associate with people that are sexually immoral. And then he wrote, but I wasn't talking about people in the world. Isn't that interesting? He says, because if you were going to do that, not associate with scoundrels, and I mean, he talks about greedy and swindlers, and then you'd have to leave the world. He said, what I'm saying is don't associate with people like that in the church. He said, because, and he says you shouldn't even eat with them. And then he goes on, he says something really interesting. He says, what business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? Isn't that interesting? What business is of mine to judge those outside the church? Is, but we are called to judge those inside the church. And then he says, God will judge those outside the church. And I think, man, it is so hard not to get on a rant with those outside the church. And I love what Andy Stanley said one time. He said, we cannot expect outsiders to begin to behave like insiders, meaning those outside the church to begin to behave like those inside the church. We cannot expect outsiders to behave like insiders until insiders begin to behave like insiders. We so much behave like we're outside the church. So, like I said, I don't typically, well, the people I do unfriend are those that everyone's an ad, they're selling Rolex watches, or this is I do unfriend those because I realize this is just an ad campaign that I suckered into. But if somebody's engaging, I'll check it out. And it is, every time I've gotten into one of those two, I felt like, man, I got suckered in. And so I just try not to respond to anything like that, and just sort of be there waiting until maybe there's an opening. I think typically we get suckered in the political things. Are there other areas that you see where you get kind of suckered into?
Oh, there's all sorts of different things people comment on. And, some people just love to make controversial things just to get engagement.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you're saying, wait a second, let me see if I'm clarifying what you're saying. You think it's okay to unfriend Christians, but you shouldn't unfriend non-Christians.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They probably, no, I don't think that's what I was saying. You need to silence them, just.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, it kind of goes this way. It's like there's a difference. I don't know how else to say it other than some people, when I go to meet with them, or I need to keep this mentality where I'm on Facebook or any other social media too. You kind of go with a ministry mentality. Does that make sense? It's like you almost have a check valve. And other people, you go with what I would call, you can only really have what they call, the Bible term, the Greek term is koinonia. It's that life exchange where I'm giving, you're receiving life from me and I'm receiving life from you. We have that in the church where we're to be exchanging life, iron sharpening iron. And but when you're with many in the world, it almost has to be like you have a check valve up. And, like in your sprinkler system in the backyard, if you have an underground sprinkler system, it has a check valve to where the water can go out, but it can't come back in. And that's not to say that you can't receive from somebody in the world, but the reason is that water that's been out into your yard, into the pipe sitting under your ground there, if it comes back into your drinking water, it's polluted. And again, it can sound so judgmental. It depends on your attitude. Oh, all the thoughts and the ideas from other people, those non-believers are going to be polluted. But in a sense, if they don't have the fear of the Lord, they don't have the beginning of wisdom or the beginning of knowledge. So you have to be careful you can't receive life from those that don't have life. Let me put it that way.
Which I think is a great way to kind of wrap this up, is the idea that basically, if you're looking for life from social media, this is not the place to find life.
No.
There's some encouraging things you can learn. Hopefully you're encouraged by this podcast.
With Christian friends, you can connect and receive some encouragement, receive life from them, but it's not really the place to go. It's really going to be that koinonia, that life exchange where I'm being challenged and encouraged by others. It needs to come from believers. And with unbelievers, I need to go with kind of a ministry mentality where I'm here to, if I can bless you, if I can encourage you, but I'm really not expecting anything in return. That makes sense?
Meaning I'm not expecting the source, like I'm not coming to you for the source of life, because I know the source of life is found in something higher, right?
Right, exactly. So I'm not going to receive my life strength or my life energy from you. I'm going to receive it from others in the body of Christ, from the Lord himself, of course, but from others in the body of Christ as well.
So should I unfriend them? Maybe.
And it depends too. If again, it depends on where you are. If you cannot control it, well, then maybe you just need to wait.
Meaning if you can't keep from lashing out.
Exactly. Yeah. If you can't
Yeah.
control yourself, is the it I'm referring to.
So
Yeah.
it's not about them, it's about you.
Yeah, it really is. It's about how much self-control do you have? And
Yeah.
maybe it's a great place to develop that fruit of the spirit, self-control.
I guess so.
There's your positive.
Don't ask for patience, he'll give it to you, right? So.
Exactly.
Hey, thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed the podcast, we've got our long form podcast. You can check that out on iTunes, Spotify, and the other one, iHeartRadio. And you can get more information about that, joelmalm.com/podcast. We hope you all have a great week. Good talk, Dad.
Blessings.